You cannot be in business if you don't have money. If you don't have money, if you don't have revenue, and if you don't have money left over, even at the end of the month, that is a problem. You have a business. You have to get paid.
Welcome to CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. I'm your host, Brandy Mabra. This is your one-stop shop to learn the business side of your practice on a deeper level. On this show, we empower you to own your CEO status to scale your practice for growth, sustainability, and profit. Listen in as we talk about how to market your practice to gain more visibility, hire, build, and engage your ride or die dream team, create streamlined operations, and make financial decisions as a CEO. It's time to show up as a confident leader to create a practice and life you love. Let's get started.
Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. It's Brandy Mabra, and I am here to introduce you to part 2 of Business Health Check-ins. So last week, we talked about part 1 of Business Health Check-ins, and it ended up kind of on the fly decision because the total episode was a little long. And because it was long, I wanted to make sure that you were in a place to absorb the information. So I'm hoping that with part 1, you were able to sit down and take notes and write down some things. And you were able to, just as you were thinking about your practice from a different lens, like, oh, I need to have this conversation, or, oh, we need to go ahead and implement this strategy, or, oh, I need to talk to my team, or, oh, I need to look at my money. So I want to make sure that you are set up for success. That's always the goal. And I'm not just fire hosing you with information. So today is part 2 of Business Health Check-ins. And so same methodology, sit down with a notebook, take some notes, or just be in a place where you can actually absorb this information. So that way you can take some key action steps back to your practice. So here's part 2 of Business Health Check-ins, and I will see you guys next week. Enjoy. So as you're going through this pillar method, the questions would be, how am I showing up when it comes to the visibility part of my practice? How's that going? So here's your questions. How many new people did we get in front of? What are we doing to engage and nurture your current population and panel? And how are you letting people know about what services your practice offers? So those are your key marketing questions. Again, how many new people did you get in front of? What are you doing to engage and nurture your current population and panel? And how are you letting people know about the services your practice offers? All right. So as you were sitting there, how's your visibility? How's your marketing going? On a scale from 1 to 5, 1 is being like, nah, yeah, I probably need some work. Haven't really done any marketing. 5, oh, I'm visible every day. I have a marketing strategy. Absolutely. We have like 4 or 5 tactics that we do. And, we have a combination of online marketing and offline marketing. And yes, our schedules are full and luscious and beautiful, and money is coming in the door, and we just are turning people away. If that's not your situation, you need to go to work. You need to go to work. So that's pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 is financial. Now, throughout this whole podcast already, the main pillar I've talked about is money. Money, money, money. And the reason why is because money is the lifeline of the practice. You cannot be in business if you don't have money. If you don't have money, if you don't have revenue, and if you don't have money left over, even at the end of the month, that is a problem. It is a problem, is a problem, is a problem. You have a business. You have to get paid. You need to get paid. You need to pay your team. So if you were sitting there saying, I need to make more money, or the financials are good, you still need to make sure that there's structure around how you're moving with your money. And I cannot say this enough because I had a workshop this past week, and the question was, what are the blind spots that you see with the clients that you work with? What does that look like? And my answer was money. There is always something that's happening financially, always. Whether if it's a mindset issue, or if it's a lack of structure issue, or I just don't understand what's happening with my practice financially to make right decisions. And even if you have a financial partner, you still need to be savvy enough to understand your money. And if you're not, that's going to cause you to pay more, either through payroll or taxes or just in general expenses. And you have to do better. You have to do better. And you have to actually get comfortable in your junk when it comes to the financial piece. You have to face it. And I am speaking from experience and I am speaking from real life experience, especially as I continue to make more money. And so at the end of the day, you have got to have structure and you have got to cry it out or face your fears, whatever that is. And even if you are in a place of making money and the money feels good, there's still some type of mindset that you have about it. Because some folks will say, "Oh, I'm good when it comes to my money. I look at my money from a place of abundance." And then once you start to talk a little bit more about it, it's like, well, they're nervous that they're gonna go back to their old financial situation. So there is so much that happens mindset-wise when it comes to money that you have to face it, and I don't care what your specialty is, and I don't care if you are sitting up there and you understand how the brain works and everything else, I don't care because you still have your own stuff. You still have your own experiences and baggage and feelings and emotions about your money, and you need to address it. So that is my rant when it comes to this financial pillar. It is so important. And so at the end of the day, if you're sitting there wondering, where should my number one focus be? Where should my number one priority be? Financials. Financials. You ain't understand your money. You don't understand it. You need to dive into it more, get comfortable with it, read a book, ask questions, ChatGPT questions. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but at the end of the day, you have to get more comfortable with your money. There's some episodes that are available to you all about money. There is the story about money. You know, what are you telling yourself? So money conversations, there's that episode. There's the episode that there's money in your operations. There's that episode. There are multiple episodes so far. There is guest experts that we've brought in about money. Go back and listen to those episodes in order to make sure that you understand this pillar. So as you're sitting down thinking about financials, the question that you are going to ask yourself will be around like what's happening with your financials when it comes to how much money is in the bank, so bank account, how much money is outstanding, especially if you take insurance. So how much money is outstanding either with patients or with payers? How much money is being denied? If people are not paying like the statements that you're sending, or if you are getting denials from claims, you know, everything that just happened with Change Healthcare, if there are ramifications where the money is not coming in the door either fast enough or at a slower rate or not at all, that's going to impact your bottom line. So you have to have a good understanding of what money's actually come in and where did it come in from and where's it at, and also what money is due to come in and what money is not coming in and why. So those are your questions that you need to ask yourself when it comes to the financial piece. For operations is one of the things that people skim over all the time. And I said this in a email where a lot of times when people talk about operations, it's just like, oh, create a policy and procedure, create a SOP, you know, and then that's because that's what they've read. Because operations is one of the most unsexiest things out of business, but is one of the most important things in business. And even when we're talking about financials, how you collect your money and in the ways that you collect your money is part of your operational process, workflows, and systems. Your whole practice is an operation. Everything you do is a process. So even though it's its own pillar, you have operational processes, systems, and workflows in every single area of your practice. How you market is a process. That's an operational process. How you collect money, again, is an operational process. How you hire is an operational process. How you work with your team is an operational process. How you work with yourself is an operational process. How you implement your practice experience, how you collect information, how like client experience, patient experience, those are all operational processes and systems. So when you say just document a process or you say just do a standard operating procedure, an SOP, that is not operations. What you need to think about when it comes to operations is how are we doing things and are we doing things the most efficient and streamlined way? And most people don't stop and pay attention. And even if you document a process, if you document a janky process, you will lose money. So you can document it all day long. You can have a hub, you can train on it, you can make sure your team understands it. But if it is a process that has bottlenecks in it, if it is a process that costs more time, if it is a process that doesn't allow for you to be productive, That is not a good operational process. And most people don't stop to pay attention to it. They don't stop and pay attention to it until, again, they look at their bank account and they see money is missing, or they look at their team turnover, or they're tired, burned out, and exhausted. Then they'll start looking at, like, how are we doing things? And you have to be proactive with this. So there are ways that you can make sure that you are efficient. So just stopping and taking a minute and say, okay, so for this, how are we doing things? And thinking about, like, step one. Step one. What is step one? How are we doing with step one? How are we doing through step 10? Does it make sense? Are there any is there anything that we're doing that's costing us time and money? So when you actually sit down and think about it, you'll find, like, we probably could eliminate this step. Or you'll find that maybe the technology, like your EHR system, you're not using it to its greatest efficiency. And that's important for you to understand too. Most people pay for EHR systems and they don't use half of what's in there. Or people are paying for EHR systems that aren't the best fit for their practice. And so they're losing money because they don't have the data that they need. For most of the clients that I work with, they're in that in between stage. So, for example, I had a conversation with one of our clients this week, and she's in a certain EHR that's I call a starter EHR. I've implemented a lot of different systems. I even have a client right now that's going through a whole EHR implementation that I'm working with her and her team with. And the starter EHRs are good for solo spaces. As you continue to grow, as you continue to hire more people, as you continue to have either additional ancillary services inside of your practice or you bring on additional providers, you will outgrow your EHR system. And most people will maybe stick with something. I know at this point in time in this space, sometimes people stick with EHRs because that's like their affiliate EHR or the EHR that they support the most, but they will grow out of it if they continue to work on their practice or grow their practice, especially if you want to have a bigger practice to where you need an EHR that actually has a better reporting system because you need data. You start to ask questions about the financial picture. You start to ask questions about your provider's productivity. You start to have questions about specific payers. You start to have questions about different like no-show rates or some of the metrics that can happen inside of a practice, a patient cycle time. I remember I did a podcast interview and I talked about patient cycle time. And sometimes the way that I speak it's not common language because I've been inside so many different practices. So, like a patient cycle time report allows for you to know how well are people moving throughout the practice from the time that from a patient checks in to the time that a patient checks out. What is that cycle time? Because it's going to allow for you to know, are we checking them in the most efficient way? Are we seeing them and the exam or whatever that appointment looks like in the most efficient way? Are we getting them checked out in the most efficient way? And then are we collecting money in the most efficient way? And so when you start to look at your patient cycle, there's a lot of key information in it that will allow for you to know, like, are we losing money along the way? And most EHR systems don't have this report. There's certain reports, like certain EHRs, more sophisticated EHRs that will give you that type of reporting, which is important because you need to know, right? And so, again, as your practice gets bigger, as you're seeing more people, as you have more people coming in through the door, how you are doing things is important. And this is with every single specialty, because at this point in time, I can say I probably have worked in every single specialty. It matters. It just matters. It really, really does. And so just making sure that you're paying attention to the how and not just the what is extremely important in operations. So that's my operational stance or rant when it comes to this. And so when we're thinking about operations, it's the how. So how are we doing? How do things feel inside of my practice? And so the operations piece is a feelings piece. I always say, because you can tell, if you see people running around with their head, kind of cut off like a chicken with their head cut off, and people are panicked, you can't find things, things aren't documented, people aren't following the policy. You might have something written down, people don't do it. That's all operational chaos. And so that's all a sign that you need to go back to the drawing board and have either additional conversations or paying attention to how are we doing things. So that's operations. The next pillar is the practice experience. And so this one is more or less like, how are you treating your patients and clients? How's that going? Do you know? Are you asking for client feedback? And I understand that there's certain scopes of practice where this might not be appropriate, but as a practice as a whole, You need to know 110% how things are going because people most times don't know how things are going in their practice until they get a complaint or they end up finding some random Google review. And they're like, "Oh," and you can be proactive with this. Just even like, "So, how are you? How's your experience going?" Or having an admin person, how did it go? Just being honest with wanting to get feedback. And I know that there's HIPAA. A lot of people say, well, HIPAA, HIPAA, HIPAA. You can do, if the patient gives you their permission, you can go ahead and divulge that information if you want to. So if it's like a testimonial or a success story, or if the patient says okay and you have that consent from that patient and you have it documented, the patient's fine with it because at the end of the day, the only person who can report a HIPAA violation would be the patient. Or if you know that you have done a HIPAA violation, then you need to address that. But outside of that, it's the patient who would say something, right? That's how you get in trouble. "You leaked my information." That's a HIPAA violation. But if that patient sees their story, they gave you permission to have it there, that's not a HIPAA violation. You just have to have the permission. Now, I understand sometimes in scopes of practices and patient and or client and relationships and things, sometimes it needs to be a different person who's maybe gathering this information so that way the space is safe. That makes sense to me, but the practice as a whole still needs to know how it's doing. So that's my stance. So whether if it's collecting information through a patient survey or a client survey, definitely you can always ask the question, "How are we doing today?" How are things going? You can send out a general anonymous email with a survey, and that information can be collected privately. Like there's so many different ways that you can actually collect information that doesn't have to feel scammy. So that's your practice experience. How are things going in the practice when it comes to how people feel about your practice? Are people recommending your practice? Do they refer people to your practice? And that's the practice experience. When it comes to your team is so important, and it's you checking in on your team. There's a lot of folks who feel that they cannot ask their team how they are doing. Like, they can't bother their team. They can't be a nuisance to their team. And at the end of the day, you need to partner with your team. Now, there are a lot of different episodes when it comes to the team aspect of hiring, and there's a really great podcast that was another really tactical podcast episode on hiring. And so, with this particular pillar, it's important for you to know, how is your team doing? Is there any opportunities for you to promote your team? Do you need to fire your team? Do you need to have some difficult conversations with your team? Do you need to have some rewarding conversations with your team? Like, do you need to recognize anybody? Is there anybody who wants to grow inside of your team? Are you having your growth conversations with your team? Do you understand your strengths and weaknesses of your team? How's the business culture when it comes to your team? So these are questions as you're sitting down doing your business health check-in that you need to understand and you need to find out. So if you are in the boat of saying, "I don't want to bother my team. I've hired my team. I don't want to delegate to my team. I don't want to be a nuisance to my team." I need for you to get out of that. You are paying these people from the money that's coming into the practice. If you are paying these people, you have to make sure that they're doing their job and that they're happy. So that way you don't have turnover and that you understand what is required from them, or that you're comfortable with what is required, or you're comfortable having these types of conversations, telling them what's required from them, and that you are setting yourself up for success as you're hiring. And then also you're setting your team up for success as you're bringing them into the practice. So that's the team pillar. That's like, how's your leadership? That's the number one thing that you can ask in this pillar. How is your leadership? Is your leadership on point? Is your leadership struggling? Are you hiding as a leader? Are you doing too much as a leader? How is your leadership? And then the last pillar, and the first pillar actually, is you as the CEO. How are you doing? That is the number one question. How am I showing up to my practice? Are you tired? Are you burned out? Are you frustrated? Do you need a vacation? Are you giving back to yourself? Are you just working all the hours? Do you feel safe inside of your practice? You want your team to feel safe inside of your practice. You want your clients and patients to feel safe inside your practice. Are you feeling safe inside your practice? And if the answer is no, okay, what do you need? I always say that one way or another, you will be forced to sit down in your practice. Either you will do it yourself, or unfortunately, what I see is a lot of times I'll have very honest conversations like, "You need to take some time off," especially if folks are coming to the calls and they're saying, "I'm tired, I'm burned out, I'm running ragged, they look bad," like, all this stuff, and the number one thing I always say is take time off. Take time off. Take a day. Take 2 days. Take 3 days. And they'll say, number one reason why, financial. I can't lose the money." Okay, well, I wanna tell you, you can either be strategic about how you're doing this, or either way, you're gonna be forced to take some time off. And usually what happens is especially if they continue to keep going, they end up getting sick. And then after they get sick, then that's when the conversation changes. "Okay, yes, I need to take some more time off. I'm now," they'll go in, they'll start to do all their self-care, like all the things that we've been talking about is now like, yes, it's a priority because and I hate it. I hate to see it when it happens, but it's like you can just tell. And for me, it's outside looking in and I can see it all over their face. Like you need time. Even if it's just time to decompress, just even fitting in little short breaks that allow for you to just take time away to decompress. It's really important for you to do that for yourself and for your mental energy, for your emotional energy, for your physical energy, like all of it. Like when it comes to entrepreneurship, there's a reason why there's terms like high performance, and it's not about perfectionism by any means. It's the opposite. It's understanding that you are imperfect, you are not a robot, and but you have to treat yourself almost like an athlete. Like you really do, because there's a certain amount of energy that is required to do this job and a certain amount of mental bandwidth that is required. And so just like an athlete, you have to take care of yourself, you have to eat the right things. If not, then your energy is awful trying to work through. Like I can always tell, but like on the days where I'm not paying attention to how I'm eating and I just kind of eat whatever, you can see it in my work. And you can see it, like I feel it. I'm like, man, I'm just like pushing through and trying to push through. And that's not a good space to be in. So paying attention to how you're treating yourself is the number one thing. I am hoping, hoping, hoping that this has been helpful. I'm hoping that as you're sitting here listening to this, you're like, oh, yeah, I need to go back and do this. At the end of the day, making sure that you are taking care of yourself, making sure that you are paying attention to how things are happening in your practice according to this pillar method. So, again, the pillar method is when you are looking at your 6 pillars of business excellence, which is marketing, financials, operations, practice experience, team, which is leadership, and you as a CEO and how each area is doing. One of the things that you can do is maybe set up time on your calendar throughout your calendar. Like, okay, I'm going to look at marketing today, or I'm going to look at financials today. Or you can just sit down and just have a business health check in day. And that's where you're actually paying attention to and taking time away to look on your practice, like seeing the forest from the trees. So that way you can make sure that the practice is moving accordingly. So if you have any questions about this, of course, I'm here for you. You can always, always, always see the show notes and a link in the show notes for how you can work with me if you need additional support. I am here, and I will talk to you guys soon.
Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the episode and it empowers you as the CEO of your practice. If you enjoyed the podcast, please make sure you subscribe, share the message, and leave a review. If you want more information and support in growing and scaling your practice, click the link in the show notes to take advantage of our free resources or apply to work with me directly. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.